Hey guys, this is Chaos Chrono back with another episode. We're moving on to display number 4. We've been having some cool decks pop up here and there. Overall, the ratings are going to be on the lower end given the nature of the selection of cards from the AOA set. So yeah, we're just going to continue on here and see if we can get something good in this one. As we get everything opened up and labeled, hope you guys been enjoying all the content so far. If you guys are looking for more content, we do have a podcast that has been posted on Spotify and other sources. We're called Team ESP, so feel free to check us out on YouTube and Spotify. Moving on to the first deck, Mort, Soothsayer of the Undead Marsh. It is a Brobnar, Sanctum, and Untamed deck. For Armor Generation, we're looking at 8 pips. Supporting cards include Healing Blast Effect, Darna, Full Moon, 2 Rustnars, and Soldiers of Flowers. So I'm estimating about 14 for Armor Generation. For Armor Control, we have Aubade, Take Hostages, and Proclamation 346E. Supporting cards include Summaries. So overall, the rating for that is 3. For Artifact Control, we do have 2 Rustnars, which is good. For Creature Control, we have First Blood, Smite, and Harder They Come, and a couple of supporting cards that include the main creatures like Bingo Bang Bang, Calfine, the 2 Gauntlet of Commands, Into the Fray, Tremor, Lion Bouchum, Blinding Light, Potion of Vulnerability, and 2 Grove Keepers and Bumblebird. So overall, creature control for direct removal, we're looking pretty low at about a 4, but there is good board presence here in this deck, and creatures that can control the board. After all, there are 3 Groggins in here. Looking at speed, there's really nothing in this deck that contributes to that, so I'm going to rate it as a 0. Obviously, Coward's End could push it into negative with the chains that it provides, but we'll just rate it as 0. So overall highlights for this deck, we do have, like I said, the board presence, especially for an AOA or competition within AOA. There are bigger bodies that can take the damage, which would be good for the efficacy of Healing Blast and Darna. We have Vault Keeper for Amber Protection, and the Key Charge and Untamed does have a decent chance of hitting based off of burst generation off of Darna or Soldiers to Flowers. So there is potential there, at least for the last key kind of thing. The bad in this deck is obviously the limited Amber Generation and Control. So all in all, I'll rate this deck at 53. The second deck is Logan of Harveststar Castle. It's a Dis, Logos, and Sanctum deck. For Amber Generation, we're looking at 15 pips, which is really nice, though we're pretty lacking in supporting cards, which include Schuler and Ortanu because he can recur the Ortanu's bindings, which does help generate as a part of the number of pips. So overall, for Amber Generation, I'm rating at 16, could be a bit higher, depending on how the playthrough goes. For Amber Control, we do have Schuler, 2 copies of Warden the Redeemed, 2 copies of Take Hostages. Supporting cards include Orb of Invidious and Summaries. So overall, Amber Control, I'm looking at about a 4. For Artifact Control, we do have Strange Gizmo, but then again, that wipes the board, so that's going to affect our own artifacts as well. So that's about a 0.5 to 1 in terms of value. For Creature Control, in direct removal, we have 3 copies of Banish, which I'm hesitant to call direct removal, but at the very least, a delay. Pain Reaction, Ortanu, 2 copies of Standardized Testing, Strange Gizmo, and Spirit Sway. Supporting cards include the Orb of Invidious, Pip, 3 Shield of Justice, and Hedros Wall. So overall, creature control, I'm rating about a 9. For speed, we're looking at Old Yerk, Archimedes, Igor, Labwork, 2 copies of Sutterkin, ZYX Researcher, Sloppy Labwork, and we do have a bit of disruption in the form of the 3 Banish, Streak, and Pip. Overall speed, I'm going to rate about an 8. So for highlights, we're looking at a good high pip deck that's made for racing, or what we call an Amber Rush deck. Pocket Universe for Amber Protection is nice, though unfortunately with Strange Gizmo in the mix, it's potentially risky or end up getting destroyed. So it's important to make sure to use the Amber on it when you're forging on a Strange Gizmo. In terms of the bad, we do have limited Amber Control, and it requires the board presence to work. So like board in the needs to stay on the board. Take hostages requires creatures to fight with in order to make use of them. And we don't really have many fighters, if any at all. So the Shield of Justice would be very important supporting cards to help us fight in conjunction with the Take Hostages for Amber Control. Otherwise, our creatures are not going to survive long enough. And again, this is more of a capture form of Amber Control, so it's more of a delay rather than actually changing the situation on the board. We have smaller creatures, so Ortanu kind of hurts the deck in that there aren't as many targets. Luckily, we do have Abon the Armorsmith to increase armor to our creatures, and we do have Sir Marrows and Shao the Safeguard that could soak up those damages for the Ortanu's bindings. But aside from them, there's no other targets. So with 2 copies of the bindings, we risk destroying our own creatures. It can be effective for cycling our Igor and ZOX Researcher if they're next to Archimedes, and so we get to reuse them. But aside from that, destroying our own creatures is not going to be very conducive to our end goal. Standardized testing will likely hit our own creatures because a bunch of them are 2 power, and unless there is a 1 power creature on the board, our creatures are going to get wiped by the standardized testing, so we have to be aware of that. And then Spirit's Way will hit all the other creatures in the deck if they happen to be on the board. So there is a bit of anti-synergy here in terms of what these situational wipes are going to clear off the board. With that being said, I'm going to rate this deck at about a 55. For deck number 3, we have a Vibroband of Techie's Cloud. It's a Mars, Shadows, and Untamed deck. For Amber Generation, we're looking at 13 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include 2 copies of Mars Needs Amber, Furtive Investors with its effect, Gamgee, Umbra, Duskrunner, and Treasure Maps effect, as well as Rustnar, Lifeweb, and 2 copies of Mimicry. So overall, for Amber Generation, we're looking at anywhere between 18 to 28 because there's a lot of unknown factors here and how much we can actually generate, whether Treasure Map's going to hit, which usually will if it's the first card played. For Amber Control, we have 2 copies of Mars Needs Amber, Gamgee, Umbra, Dustrunner, 3 copies of Skeleton Key, which is a lot, and Lifeweb. Supporting cards includes Shockworm and Stormcrawler. So overall Amber Control, I'm looking at about an 8. For Artifact Control, we're looking at just the 1 Rustnar, so that's a 0.5. For Creature Control, for Direct Removal, we're looking at Texel Beambuckler, Life for a Life, Whistling Darts, and Save the Pack. Supporting cards include Entropic Manipulator and 2 copies of Mimicry. Overall, I'm going to rate Creature Control about a 5. For speed, we have Mars First, Combat Pheromones, Invasion Portal, Dust Chronicles, Glimmer, 2 copies of Dust Witch, and 2 copies of Mimicry. So some of those aren't exactly contributing to speed, but so overall I'm going to rate it about a 5. However, some of these can be supportive towards the speed in this deck. So overall highlights, we have good Amber potential and a sufficient amount of Amber control. Whistling Darts and the potential in obviously the Mimicries to combo with the Save the Pack or the Mars Needs Amber is pretty good. We have Dust Switch with Sky Booster for a little bit of a combo there that can't keep repeating to the rule of 6. And Dust Switch is obviously very good for giving us the ability to use a Gamgee or Umbra right off the bat. The bad in this deck is that it's lacking creature control, and for an AOA deck, that's pretty detrimental for especially competition within the set. It has a low creature count along with low creature size, and it's limited creature control and has inconsistent wipes. Unfortunately, it's not fast enough to be a rush deck, so there's going to be a bit of a balancing act here that needs to be done. Overall, I'm going to rate this deck at a 60 based off its numbers and potential. I can definitely see this go higher based off the potential Amber generation, but the creature control holds it back, and the style of Amber control is very situational, so it's not going to be as consistent. For deck number 4, we have Dazpurse Caves Delegate. It's a Broadnar Sanctum Shadows deck. For Amber generation, we have 11 pips. Supporting cards include Fuzzle, Yangtze Gang, Brand the Fanatic, Dustburner, maybe Merkins, and 2 Redlock. So for Amber Generation, we have a rating about a 16. Amber Control, we have 2 Grunt Buggies with 7 guaranteed large creatures that fit the role, with up to 13 based off of the Lion Boutrims. We have Maruk the Marked, Yangtze Brand the Fanatic, and Dust Runner. Supporting cards are Abon the Armorsmith, Protect the Weak, and those kind of correlate with Maruk for its Amber Control capabilities, and Barrister Joyef again for Amber Control. So overall, I'm gonna rate it at an 8. For Artifact Control, we have maybe Merkins if you hit something off the opponent's side, but otherwise none. For Creature Control, we have Bramo, Coward's End, Flamewake Shaman, 2 copies of Spirit's Way, Beamos Lightbringer, Whistling Darts, and Lights Out for direct removal. Supporting cards include Tremor, Bellowing Patrazate, 3 Lion Boutrims, 2 copies of Shield of Justice. So all in all, the creature control is pretty strong here. I'm rating it about a 10. For speed, we have Sound the Horns, and negatively we have Coward's End's Chains, along with 2 copies of Dusk Chronicles. So overall, I'm gonna give the speed about a 2. Highlights. So the good in this deck is it has big boy presence. The Brobnar is definitely doing its job, and the Sanctum is supporting it, so that's very nice. The 2 Grunt Buggies with, like I said, the supporting cards as earlier. We have Maruk with increased armor cards, as I mentioned. Vimos with no elusive creatures in this deck, except for Knuckles Bolton, so we don't accidentally hit our own creatures. And Bellowing Patrazate with Maruk and Brand is a good combination in that when it's ready, it's going to automatically allow Maruk to be a Amber Control when you play him down. And with Brand the Fanatic, we can start with a damaging process, so there's ways to remove him. With some of our creatures that, or some of our play effects that deal damage, like Flamewake Shaman. Otherwise, Spirit's Way is really the only way to take him out. So unfortunately, he doesn't have a way to be removed in-house, so that's a bit of a negative aspect to this deck. Another anti-synergy is within Brobnar, Coward's End, and Bellowing Patrazate. Obviously, they don't complement each other at all. And another bad thing is that it is highly dependent on the board, especially with Grunt Buggy as a primary form of Amber Control. And it's a double-edged Amber Control, so if the opponent manages to jump ahead on high number of creatures, that's going to hurt us. And the overall generation is pretty low in this deck, so depending on what creatures their opponent has in their deck, it can be more difficult for yourself to win with the Grunt Buggy on the board. Overall, I'm going to rate this deck at about a 65. Within an AOA setting, I think this deck can perform even higher, just with the amount of board control it has and the cost control. And I've seen a double Grunt Buggy do some real damage in a tournament setting before, so within the AOA meta, I think it's got potential. Otherwise, less so. For deck number 5, we have Eminent v Brightwar. It is a Sanctum Shadows Untamed deck. For Amber generation, we have 13 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Healing Blast Effect, Sucker Punch, which is repeatable, Swindle, and Throwing Stars. Overall, I'm going to give it about a 20. For Amber Control, we have Board in the Redeemed, Doors Up to Heaven, and Swindle. So I'll rate the Amber Control about a 4 because they're actually pretty good quality controls, albeit lacking a number. For Artifact Control, we have Grasping Vines, so that's about a 0.5. For Creature Control, we have Direct Removal in Smite, Sucker Punch, Throwing Stars, Whistling Darts, and the 7 Plague Rats. For supporting cards, we have Lion Boutrim, 2 copies of Shield of Justice, Radiant Truth, Grovekeeper, Bumblebird, and Pepeka Anga. So overall creature control, I'm rating about an 8. For speed, we have Regrowth, 2 copies of Regrowth, and Dusk Witch. They can contribute, but they don't exactly make you draw or play additional cards. So I'll still rate the speed at a 0. For highlights, we have good Amber generation potential and creature control within shadows, obviously in the form of the Plague Rats. Unfortunately, it is slow and has limited Amber control. The quality of the control is pretty good, but again, the number is lacking. If we were to have glaring weaknesses in a deck, we probably want to see a fast deck with Amber generation or a slow deck with Amber control to be more useful and to fit that playstyle. We have no archiving to help us like strategically play our Plague Rats. So unfortunately, with 7 Plague Rats, you may get a handful of them, and that can cause problems in terms of spending all your board control in one go at the risk of clogging your hand for draws and such. So that's a part of this deck that requires some attention. And it's really easy to hit the rule of 6 with that many Plague Rats. So overall, this deck is more of a collector's deck for the 7 Plague Rats it has. It's weak to board wipes, and like even in the cards that do widespread damage, like if the opponent has Whistling Darts, there goes all our Plague Rats kind of thing. Unless our Penpack is out, which is at least one turn after we play down the Plague Rats. Obviously, the negative side to the Plague Rats as well is the damage it does to friendly units, and everything else here is going to get hit. So overall, for the sauce of this deck, I'm going to rate at about a 58. That might be a little higher than it should be. For deck number 6, we have Hunter, Faythe, Iguicell. It's a Dis Mars Untamed deck. Starting with Amber Generation, we have 8 pips. Supporting cards include Misery Exploit, Mars Needs Amber for its effect, 3 Mind Warpers, and 2 Harvesters. Overall, for Generation, I'm rating it at about 13. For Amber Control, we have Charette, Mars Needs Amber, and 3 Mind Warpers. So overall control is about 4. For Artifact Control, we have 2 copies of Grasping Vines, giving us a value of 1. For Creature Control, we have Cold a Week, Unlock Gateway, Call of Subordination, Key to Dis, Save the Pack, Curiosity, and Perilous Wilds. Other supporting cards are Hysteria and Nature's Call. So overall Creature Control, I'm rating about an 8, as I'm actually not counting the Save the Pack because we're lacking anything to combo with it. For speed, there's really nothing that's contributing, so I'm going to rate it about 0. Highlights of this deck, we have good board control, or like a good number of board control. The quality is a little lacking, and that's about it. For the bad, we have no direct damage to spread across the opponent's board to work with that Save the Pack, or Misery Exploit, or Mars Needs Amber. So there's 3 cards that really relies on having your opponent's board damaged that this deck doesn't have tools to generate to support. So in that case, it's definitely quite a bit of anti-synergy there. We really don't have any fighters, so it's a bunch of small creatures. And overall, looking at Mars, it has very little value. Like, Mind Warpers are great in getting some Amber back, but with the spot removal we see in Keyforge nowadays, 2 power creatures are very removable, so the elusive doesn't really matter all too much. 3 power elusive is probably where it becomes more of a question of being removable or not. For Xanthic's Harvester, positioning is key, so that's potential limiting as well on its own. So yeah, overall I'm going to rate this deck at a 50. Moving on to deck number 7, we have Pyschoname, the Expert of the Last Drop. It is a Dis, Mars, and Untamed deck. For Amber Generation, we're looking at 7 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Misery Exploit, A Fair Game, Harvester, Rustnar, and Mimicry. So overall, Amber Generation, I'm rating it about 12. For Amber Control, we have Lash of Broken Dreams and 2 copies of Nizic Resonator. Supporting cards include Gold Key Imp and Shockworm. Overall, Amber Control, I'm rating about a 3. For Artifact Control, we have Poltergeist, Rustnar, and Grasping Vines, so it's pretty good in this deck at about a 2.5. For Creature Control, we have Unlock Gateway, They're Everywhere, Kindred's Longshot for direct removal, and supporting cards include Zorg, Shockworm, Persistence Hunting, and Penpaka Anga. So overall Creature Control, I'm rating at about a 3. For speed, we have A Fair Game, Mars First, Brainstem Antenna, and Dusk Witch. Again, some of these are just more supportive in nature rather than truly getting you additional cards or helping you cycle, so I'm only rating speed about a 2. We do have 2 copies of Binding Irons and Shockworm to disrupt the opponent as well. So overall highlights, this deck is good in that it's a toolkit deck, it has a bit of everything, but unfortunately there's some numbers that are just too low. Amber Control being one of them, and Creature Control. So within Keyforge itself, those are 2 critical numbers that when it's low, the deck is going to be hard pressed to perform. So I'm going to rate this deck at a 50. Moving on to deck number 8, we have Elder, Fullgal, Dasgupta. It is a Brobnar, Sanctum, and Untamed deck. For Amber generation, we're looking at 10 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Blood Money, The Flex, Healing Blast for its effect, 2 Amber Spine Mongrels, and Soldiers of Flowers for its effect. So overall, Amber generation, I'm expecting about a 20. For Amber control, looking at Maruk, Take Hostages, Baron Mengevin, Doorstep to Heaven, and Proclamation 346E. Supporting cards include Summaries and Amber Spine Mongrel. Overall, I'm going to rate that Amber control at about a 6. I don't see any artifact control, so that's going to be a 0. And for creature control, we have Brammo and Smite for direct removal, with Lion Bautrim, Summaries, Potion Vulnerability, and Tremor for support. Of course, we do have our big Brobnar creatures as well, so that's pretty good for getting a board, but for controlling the opponent's board, it's going to be very fight-based and lacking on direct removal, which is going to be rated about a 3. For speed, we have supportive cards like Grimmer, Gravit Cycle, and 3 copies of Regrowth, but none of them actually help you draw more. It's just more getting the cards you need when you need it, so it's more of an efficiency play rather than speed. So I'm going to rate the speed at 0, but obviously there's some support to help with a bit of speed. For highlights, we have a decent amount of Amber generation. We have a bunch of large creatures with Flex, not to mention Lion Bautrim that can push it even higher to generate potentially 6 Amber off of Flex. And it also improves the chances that Healing Blast will hit for the additional Amber. So the generation is as decent as it is because we're expecting good numbers from those creatures. We have 3 copies of Regrowth that makes sure all the important creatures we need maintain on the field to stay there. So we can always bring back Amber Spine Mongrel to mess with the opponent. We can always bring back a giant Lollip or other large creatures in case they've been taken out before we get to use Flux on them. And we can always bring back Glimmer to again bring back other cards as needed. So there's a bit of interplay there. Having Doorstep to Heaven is always great in terms of a hard no for Amber control, and a Vault Keeper to prevent the opponent from stealing your Amber is always good. And another highlight is the Maverick Tremor that's in this deck. In terms of the bad, all the other stats other than the Amber generation is low. So that's going to be obvious weaknesses to how this deck's going to perform. You're going to need to fight for your board. It's not going to be a simple wipe and you take the advantage. So the efficiency on that is pretty low. But if you do hold the board and it's established, you're going to be in a really good position. So all in all, the rating for this deck I'm going to give a 58. Moving on to deck number 9, we have Einhardt, Copper, Azamight. It is a Brobnar, Dis, and Logos deck. For Amber generation, we have 14 pips of Amber, again a very good amount. We have supporting cards including Fuzzle, Blood Money, Smith, Schuler, and Nefru. Overall, I'm going to rate the generation about 19. For Amber control, we unfortunately only have a Schuler, a single Schuler. So I'll rate it as a 1, but that's very lackluster. Artifact control, we do have Poltergeist, which is one of the best forms of artifact control, so I'll give that a 1. For creature control, we have 1-2 Punch, First Blood, 2 copies of Pound, 2 copies of Call of the Week, and Serendipity Testing, with supporting cards including Tremor and Bilgam Avalanche. So I'm going to rate the creature control at about a 7. For speed, we have Exhume, Not Finished With You, Ancient York, Archimedes, Helperbot, Hexbian, Sutterkin, 2 copies of Titan Librarian, 2 copies of ZYX Researcher, Directive ZYX, and some disruptive cards like Tremor and Seismo Entangler. So for speed, I'm going to rate about a 12. Highlights, we have good generation and speed, so it's well suited to be a racing style deck. We do have a Pit Lord, which is normally bad, but we do have Scullion to remove it in-house on the same turn, and Exhume in case your Scullion's dead and you want to play your Pit Lord, you can still play the Exhume to bring back your Scullion. We do have some archiving options to prep the deck as needed in all of Logos. So overall, the bad, we don't have any Amber control, obviously, so you're just going to run straight out of the gates, try to outrun your opponent, and hope they don't have the answers when you got the Amber going. So with that being said, the generation in this deck isn't as high as you would need in a deck that's purely going to run off Amber, and there is no key cheat, so you're going to be in a tough spot with this deck. So overall, I'm going to rate this deck at a 54. Next, we have deck number 10, the Elder of Silverlawn. It's a Logos, Mars, and Sanctum deck. For Amber generation, we have 9 pips of Amber. Supporting cards include Cutthroat Research, Vespian Theorist, 2 copies of Mind Warper, and Martyr's End. So overall, Amber generation, I'm looking at about a 14. For Amber control, we have Cutthroat Research, 2 Mind Warpers, Albeit the Grim, and Baron Mangevin. Supporting cards include Pip-Pip, Shockworm, and Summaries. So overall, Amber control, I'm gonna say it's a 4. Artifact control, there is none. I don't see anything that affects artifact control, unfortunately, so it's a 0. Creature control, we have 2 Pokes, Standardized Testing, Mother Gun, Tixel Beambuckler, Orbital Bombardment, Zookeeper, Smite, The Spirit's Way, Themos Lightbringer, and supporting cards like Pip-Pip, Shockworm, Lion Valtrum, Hallowed Shield, and Potion of Invulnerability. All in all, the creature control, I'm rating about a 10. For speed, we have Archimedes, 2 copies Poke, Sutterkin, Wild Wormhole, Memory Chip, Research Smoko, Vespian Theorist, Invasion Portal, and Sigil of Brotherhood, bringing the speed up to about an 8. Overall highlights, we have a good amount of board control and speed. Potion of Vulnerability with Smite and Large Sanctum creatures is nice to see. Unfortunately, the Amber generation is very board dependent or situational. So cards like Martyr's End is going to be situational, and you need a board to generate off of it. Not to mention, exchanges your board presence for Amber, so the value isn't quite there since it's not production but exchange of value. Amber control is situational or board dependent as well, and we have concerns over Wild Wormhole hitting any one of the wipes in this deck that could hit ourselves. Overall, I'm going to rate this deck at a 55. For deck number 11, we have Vengetrap of the Castellan's Riverside. It is a Broadnar, Logos, and Mars deck. For Amber generation, we have 11 pips. Supporting cards include Smith's Effect, the War Chest, Binate Rupture, Harveststar, and Total Recall, giving the total Amber generation about an 18. For Amber control, we have Groke and Take That Smarty Pants. So 2 cards, and 1 being board dependent, 1 being situational. I am gonna rate the Amber control at a 1, but it's gonna feel more like a 0, especially if you're not playing against a Logos deck. For artifact control, we have none, so another weakness to this deck. For creature control, we have Bramo, Coward's End, First Blood, Poke, 2 Standardized Testing, Mother Gun, Tixel Beambuckler, Mothership Support, Red Planet Ray Gun, and Plague Master. So we have a good number there at about an 11. For speed, we have Igor, Helperbot, Labwork, Poke, Titan Librarian, Wild Wormhole, 2 copies of Director of ZYX, Research Smoko, Invasion Portal, Mars First, Combat Pheromones. So overall speed is pretty good at 10. For highlights, as we said, the good, we have an average decent amount of Amber generation, board control, and speed. It severely lacks Amber control, so most people would consider this a dead deck as that stands. But sometimes it might be just fun to see how fast the deck can race. And the other unfortunate thing is we have a Binate Rupture, which helps us generate, but it also helps your opponent generate. So it's very situational when you get to use that, maybe immediately after they forged, assuming they don't go up on Amber again. We also have Total Recall, which is like Martyr's End, maybe a little bit better because you don't lose the creatures but having to destroy them, but it bounces all your creatures back to hand. So if you have board control, then it might be viable as an Amber generator and Amber Rush, but aside from that, it's not going to be very viable. So in summary, this deck has to kind of be played as a brush deck, and again, like a note deck we talked about, it's just hoping it can get to the end game before the opponent has a chance to control, without many answers for several things like the opponent's own Amber generation, as well as any artifacts the opponent may have. I'm going to rate this deck at 52. The final deck of this display, we have Viceroy, Bileanchor, Javitz. It's a Disc Logos and Untamed deck. For Amber generation, we have 10 pips, and supporting cards like Hecatomb for its effect, Tisania, Full Moon, and possibly Mimicry. So overall Amber generation, I'm looking at about 13. For Amber control, we have 2 copies of Charette. Supporting cards include backup copy, so we're really relying on those Charettes. leaving me to rate the Ember Control at about a 2. For Artifact Control, we have none once again. For Creature Control, we have Banish, 2 copies of Cold a Week, Unlock Gateway, Hecatomb, Standardized Testing, 3 copies of Save the Pack, They're Everywhere, Lupo, and Mighty Tiger. Supporting cards include Persistence Hunting, Mimicry, and Witch of the Wilds, so we can play them out of house, leaving me to rate the Creature Control about a 10. For speed, we have Old Yurk, Igor, Helperbot, Library of Babel, 2 Titan Librarians, a Wild Wormhole, Philo the Researcher, Chaos Portal, and Witch of the Wilds, with some disruption in Binding Irons, Tezmal, Shadows of Dis, and Pip. Overall speed, I'm going to rate about a 10. For highlights, we have good creature control, speed, and disruption, with house cheating in Helperbot and Witch of the Wilds. But unfortunately, the Ember Control is lacking, severely lacking. Generation is also lacking, and there is no artifact control. We have 3 copies of Save the Pack with only 1 copy of They're Everywhere, so that combo is going to hit off once, and then you're going to have 2 copies of Save the Pack that's doing next to nothing. We have Hecatomb, which is not ideal because our charrettes are going to be our main Ember Control, and they're essentially delays rather than real control. So if they're on the board, Hecatomb will not be useful to us. All in all, another fast deck without some of the core pieces needed to generate. So overall, I'm going to rate this at a 52. Well, that brings us to the end of this display. I think this one's been the weakest we've opened so far. So unfortunately, not really anything exciting to witness for you guys. But hopefully this has been good practice for each and every one of you that's watching. And by making these videos, it's helped me keep maintaining practice and an understanding of this set as it continues to be a part of the game as an evergreen game. Hopefully we will get to one of the crazy decks and we'll get something exciting that we can really dive into and explore. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the content. If you did, please leave a like and feel free to subscribe. If there's anything you'd like to suggest, whether positive feedback, critiques, whatnot, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. And as always, be kind and happy forging.